Okay, thanks, Linda. I'd like to welcome everybody to Growing Concerns for May the 14th. Today we're going to go through a few items. I guess weather's been kind of the topic of the day for the last little while here, so I thought we'd get Mike back to maybe give us a little bit of an update of what's to come, say, over the next week to 2 weeks, as we're getting to the point where a lot of producers are starting to get that question in their head already as to, when are we going to get going. So hopefully Mike can give us some information and some insight into what's going to happen over the next little while. Then there's been a lot of rumblings lately about the possibility of shortage of fertilizer, and probably because of a timing thing that was probably a big concern. Maybe some of that has eased off a little bit right now, but got the opportunity to get John Hurd to come on and talk a little bit about fertilizing the 2014 crop and some of the things we could do if we find ourselves in a situation of fertilizer shortage, and what we should, the do's and don'ts, I guess, of fertilizing the 2014 crop. And then after that, I'm going to end it off with a little bit of a crops update as to what's been happening in the area over the past week. And so just a couple slides here to before Mike gets started here. This was the scene, I guess, going through on number 10 highway through Riding Mountain on Mother's Day, and they eventually had to close the road, so they're definitely getting lots of snow up that way. And I think this morning when I was watching the news, they were even talking snow in Winnipeg this morning. So we're still getting snow, and I think, and maybe Mike will comment on this, but I think to the east of us they were even expecting a larger amount of snow over the past couple of days here. So even though we're getting lots of snow, we still have lots of water around too. This is the Assiniboine Valley, which is just south or north of Souris here as you go down 21 Highway. And there's a fair bit of land underwater down in the valley there. So there's a lot of water still to go in some areas, and producers are going to be waiting to, this was a sunflower field last year, and you could just see some of the heads above water. So the water is fairly deep, and it's going to take a little bit of time for that water to go down and to leave the area. So we're going to need a fair bit of time in some areas before guys can get on the land, and we're going to need some weather to cooperate with us to get going here. So I guess with that, Mike, if you're ready to go, we'll start off your presentation.
Thank you. Good morning, Southwest Manitoba. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead, Mike.
Okay, great. Okay, good morning, everyone. What I'll talk about this morning, I'll see where we are in the last 2 weeks with precip. We'll take a look at the current conditions, and then we'll take a bit of an outlook for the next 2 weeks, and we'll also take a peek at part of the right up to the middle of the growing season. So here we go. Oh, I gotta reduce this thing. Sorry guys, I can't minimize my thing. Here we go. Okay, here's if everybody can see this graphic here. I can't get rid of my webinar screen. It's covering up half of my screen. But here's the total rainfall that we've experienced from May 1st out to May 12th. And you can see the Southwest has got lots of precip in the last week and a half, pushing on 2 inches that we've accumulated in the Southwest, especially around the the forest, that whole strip that goes from Riding Mountain southward. So lots of precip. The central areas and the inner lake got off a tad, and the southeast from this low pressure that's just moved by dropped lots and lots of rain, close to 3 inches. So things are wet up there. I was up in Bede on Friday afternoon, and there's water in all the fields up there. So lots of water up in the parkland area. Also, I noticed this morning I woke up with snow in Winnipeg. It's now been melted on the surface, so not a bit of a problem. Out east is a bit of a different story. We'll take a look at that too. So there's the total rainfall from May 1st out to May 12th. Okay, here's the latest surface analysis from this morning. And if you look off to the Hudson Bay, that low pressure that's we've been under the influence of for the last 4 or 5 days is slowly moving off. Now, I must say that this thing started just to the south of us 4 or 5 days, and it's only meandered slowly all the way up to Hudson Bay since that time. It's really strong pressure gradient in that low pressure, and what it's doing basically is throwing off lots of moisture back down on the return flow, back down to the eastern sections. What we experienced in Winnipeg with snow this morning, that risk has kind of moved on now that the sun is up and the clouds are slowly moving off to the east. It's going to take a while though, but it's on its way out. So that's things this morning. We definitely dropped below zero in lots of places last night. Not too far below zero, but below zero. Okay, next slide. This is the significant weather depiction for this morning. And the one thing I wanted to show you to show you the extent of the precip and where it is right now. And this whole brown cloud area is the return flow off of that low. And within there, you'll see from this line eastward, there is a risk of snow, light snow throughout. One thing I wanted to point out with this map is that this big, nice H that's in northern Saskatchewan is moving down at about 15 knots right towards us. So we're definitely going to get some clearing starting today. However, with that clearing and the high pressure also comes cooler than normal temperatures. So as everyone knows, we've been colder than normal most of the spring so far, and it's going to continue throughout. So this high pressure isn't very good news. The only good thing about that is that it's going to bring drying conditions, at least for the next couple of days anyway. So we'll see those 25% humidities in the daytime. Now, here's one thing I wanted to show you. This is a temperature anomaly, and this is the biggest risk I see for cold temperatures once this high moves in, and it's for Friday morning. You can see in your area in the southwest, it's going to be below zero for quite a good bit of area throughout. So Friday morning looks nice and cool. Well, I don't know about nice, but it's going to be cool for sure. This looks like the coldest day out of this next little stretch with this high pressure. So Friday morning. Now, one thing about this high coming in, drying things out, it's going to whisk off really quickly, and unfortunately there's a low behind it that's going to start affecting you guys in the southwest. You might pick up some showers maybe late Saturday into Sunday, just small little showers at the start. Nothing too significant. I'll take a look at some of the weather models. This is the Canadian GEM, and it's the accumulated precip out to the 20th of May. And that's Monday night, actually. And the reason I wanted to show you is this is right around when we should get another low pressure, almost the same as what we experienced this week, coming through starting around Sunday, Monday. Taking a look, the southeast seems to be let off at the start of the system, although I wanted to point to you up around the Swan River area and Russell area where they expect some heavier showers, and it looks like maybe up to 2 inches. And this is accumulated up till Monday night, so you can see showers throughout. The east is let off slightly, although they won't be getting off without anything, that's for sure, the southeast. So this is the Canadian model, takes us out to next Monday night for accumulated precip. Now, here's out to the 24th of May. It's actually next Friday night, and the reason I wanted to show you is just the impending doom of the precip to our south. Just as the last system came through and we expected it to clip the southeastern edge, we kind of really got off easy. We should have, or we were forecasting that we'd get a bit more, maybe an inch more in the southeast, but it really didn't happen, which is good. this precipitation map is an accumulated map also. And this purple, this area starts to scare me when we get into the 3-4 inch area to our south. So we'll have to keep an eye on that system. As the last system came through, this one is expected to stay, most of the precip stay to the south of us and to the southeast of you guys too. So that's good news. This graphic does show, you can see that Melita area, that Reston area, only expecting maybe 10 millimeters throughout the next 2 weeks, which is good. They don't need any more precip. However, the central areas and southeast areas, as you can see by this graphic, they're not going to get off that easy. And this is once again out till next Friday. Here's the American model for the same time period. This takes us out to the 24th. And much the same values, except the Americans are forecasting that the big precip areas are going to stay a bit more to our southeast than forecasted. Still, they're in the inch and a half range for most of southern Manitoba. So there is rain coming. That system, it's another quick moving one, and it's coming off from our west, and it's going to sweep really quick over the western U.S. and start to slow down again as it enters the Dakotas. So we'll definitely know more by early next week how this is going to affect us. I'll take you out even farther. This takes us out to the end of May, and this is the American model. And as you can see, the southeast, that's some pretty big fields with the 2 to 3 inches, and the 4s are keeping, the 4 inch marks are keeping out of the southeast. So all in all, it looks like lots of rain to come for May. Now I'll touch a bit on the big picture. Here's a 3-month outlook for temperature probability. It matches the Canadian models quite well, but I like showing the Americans. This one was produced on 17 April, and it takes us from May, June, July, and as you can see, most of southern Manitoba is expected to be below normal. And once again, I have to point out that the southern U.S. is way above normal again. However, there is some precip coming for the folks down south, so the drought situation down there in the southwest and the Texas Panhandle area is basically kind of stalled a bit. Nothing's getting worse or getting any better. So we'll watch the next 3 weeks how the precip happens for them. But other than that, for us, definitely colder than normal for the summer it's looking so far. One thing that I touch on once in a while is the bigger picture, which is the Madden-Julian oscillation down south, which produces the La Nina and El Nino effects. Now, we've been watching this all spring. We've been neutral for the last almost 18 months, which kind of plays a bit of havoc in the long-term forecasting. So just keep that a note of that when we're neutral, the forecasts don't seem to pan out as well as they do for the long term. However, they continue to figure that we're going to be affected by El Nino this winter. Each month in each forecast period, it increases the risk. It's up to about 65% now in terms of it's starting to set in sometime in the summer. Now, what this means for us in southern Manitoba, basically, since we're on the edge of any big precip when these events come, one thing that can be sure is we'll be warmer than normal this winter if we do get an El Nino. How much is to be seen depending on how the strength of the event, but warmer than normal will tweak everybody's ears and make everybody happy. We've had 2 pretty cold winters in a row. It's time for a break. So everything's looking towards a bit of a warmer winter for us here in southern Manitoba. That's all I have unless there's any questions. Just to summarize, another low coming for next Monday that should affect mostly the southeast. However, there is showers for you guys starting probably Saturday night.
I don't have any questions at this time. Lionel, do you have any?
That's all I have.
Yeah, Mike, when you look to the east of us where they're into Ontario where they're getting all the snow and rain, are they expected to get the bigger amount of rainfall when this next one goes through as well?
Yep, it's Lionel, it's going to track a lot like this last one did, where it's coming up from the mid-U.S. around the Colorado area where the low's forming. the problem right now is, and here's what it is. The jet stream right now is troughing right over Manitoba. In other words, the jet stream is going north-south to the west of us, dipping all the way down to the States, and then coming back northward up along the west of the Great Lakes. Now what this causes basically is the systems on the surface, you'll get a lot of cyclogenesis, which means that lows will form along the meandering jet stream. Just because of the curves in the jet stream, it causes spinning and everything else. So what happens there is lows really generate quickly, and they just whip through and follow along the track of the jet stream, almost like it's being shot out. So when these things really move fast, anything can happen. They're predictable. However, the amounts of precip and where they're going to fall and the timing sometimes is suspect. So if you remember the last system, I was speaking on the extreme moisture team, and we were expecting it to come through Wednesday, the last low. It was 2 days earlier, so things move really quick, and they're hard to forecast out to 10 days out. But the one thing I can confirm is that when we see these precip fields, generally they usually pan out. Timing is the only suspect, though. It could be a day earlier, it could be a day later. So it looks like for sure the Kenora area for sure will get whacked. How much it extends into the southeast of Manitoba, we'll just have to wait for the track of the low, and of course the timing of the low, what time of day it comes through us. So, but one thing is for sure that the atmosphere is stacked all the way up with this low, with moisture in all the layers. So there'll be significant precip wherever it falls, whether it's southeast Manitoba or just in northwestern Ontario.
You also mentioned cooler than normal, so like are we going to get many days in the 20s, or is it going to be like the...
Well, we might lick into 20 this weekend for a short period of time preceding this low, but there's nothing in the models that is showing me that we're going to warm up significantly. Now, I say that, but then again, if you look on the models, just below the Dakotas, everything's 30 degrees. So it's close. It just doesn't seem to want to make it up here yet. And part of that is due to that jet stream troughing southward right in this area. So cold temperatures, colder than normal. I mean.
So, Mike, the question...
I didn't produce a GDD map this...
You should have got warmed up. So the question, Mike, is will we actually get a summer?
A better summer?
Yeah, a summer at all, I guess.
Well, cooler than normal doesn't necessarily mean no summer. So far, it's looking like 3, 4, 5 degrees below normal throughout the whole summer. So yeah, we'll be cooler than normal. How much cooler than normal? Well, we'll have to wait and see, but it's not significantly cooler than normal. Whether or not we get, the 50 or 30 or 40 days of above 30, probably not. However, 28 is pretty close to 30. So to answer your question, cooler than normal.
That's all the questions that I have.
Okay, thanks, Mike. That was good, and don't really want to say it, but I hope you're kind of wrong, and hopefully it warms up a little bit, and we get and the rain misses us and goes to the east. I guess with that, we're ready to go to John Hurd's presentation, and John has got some information regarding the 2014 soil fertility considerations for 2014. So John, if you're ready, we'll go right into yours.
Okay, thanks, Lionel. I think you've got my screen up there just saying the soil fertility considerations. And actually, I'm dealing with the questions you forwarded to me, Lionel. Should people be changing their nitrogen practices? What's prompted that question is, what's the availability of product when I need it at seeding? And if there's going to be late seeding, will there be reduced yield potential? And then you also had a question regarding forage fertilization, so I'll finish up with that. So first question is, what products do you definitely need at seeding? The musts are phosphorus for early, crop establishment and growth, and we especially get good response to phosphorus under cold soil conditions. And potassium, if we need it, if we're in a situation where we need that in our soil, seeding is the time to do that. But those are the immobile nutrients. They don't move very much. Top dress applications in season are not going to do anything for you with phosphorus and potassium. Top dressed options are those nutrients that are mobile, can move through the soil, and they're not needed right away for the seedling. And so those are nitrogen and sulfur. And then, of course, most micronutrients, those needs can be met with foliar options. This is just a schematic of the crop nitrogen uptake patterns, looking at some prairie data. The canola blue line, wheat green line, those are from the research done in Saskatchewan, and the others are Manitoba researched. Basically, the difference showing that there is our cool season crops that we're seeding early, canola and wheat, they're taking up and need most of their nitrogen rate of uptake is during June, and those other crops are establishing in June, not really taking up the lion's share of their nitrogen until they're into July. If we're looking at wheat, here's a graph out of Montana looking at the percent of total nitrogen uptake by wheat, and we can see much of it takes place right during the tillering stage. So that would make sense that you would like to have your nitrogen in place during that phase in order to meet the nutrition of the crop. If the next slide is looking at some Wesco data that they did with hybrid canola. This is one of their Manitoba sites at Petersfield, and seeing that at the 5 weeks after seeding at the 6th leaf stage, hybrid canola has taken up about 6 pounds of nitrogen per acre per day. So you need to have the meal on the table before it's consuming nitrogen at that extent. And so it looks like targeting it for the 3 to 4 weeks after seeding would have your nitrogen in place for that, that appetite. There's been research done, not recent, but in the past in Manitoba, looking at what is the crop response to delayed nitrogen applications. And this is some data from Gazer rats, and showing that, yes, we can go sometimes up to 4 weeks after emergence with cereals and still get pretty good yield response with applied, the blue bar is ammonium nitrate and the purple bar is urea. The white bar there is 28% nitrogen, and the thing to note is that that was a spray application. If that's being dribbled, we would expect it to perform very well, as good as urea. And if we're going in at that stage, if we have some nitrogen at seeding but are looking for the remainder to be top dressed, there are options to go in here. I'm going to just report a few of the findings from the late Guy Lafon's work at Indian Head, where he was developing post-nitrogen applications for canola and wheat based on optical sensor technology. But here's some of the lessons that he found. And one is that if you're purposely going to a delayed nitrogen application, it's still good or important to have half to 2/3 your nitrogen on at seeding. The remainder can go on later. Some of the previous data I showed you showed that, yes, a good time would be the 3 to 5 leaf stage or tillering and cereals, and certainly prior to bolting for canola. Just because you've driven the floater over the field doesn't mean the crop has that nitrogen. It still needs rainfall to get it into the root zone. And in some of Guy's studies that he had done there, in 1 out of 3 years, when it remained dry after application, that nitrogen was stranded at the surface. So that is one of the risks. We would tend for it to be more reliable in moisture regions. And the last point there is we need to protect against volatilization losses. I've just listed here some of those risk factors with volatilization. It would be either with urea or UAN 28% solutions, and that would be risk factors is a moist soil followed by drying conditions that are windy and warm, high soil pH, or free lime at the surface is a risk factor. Sandy soils, low in organic matter with a lower cation exchange capacity is a risk factor, and also if there's a lot of crop residue on the surface. Management options, sounds like Mike Wroblewski is promising us a lot of rain. So if we have rain, then we know that between 1/4 and 4/10 of an inch of rain is enough to take surface urea into the soil. The other dribble banded 28 is better than sprayed 28%. And certainly we can protect from volatilization using a product like Agritane. Now, with liquid products, there's an option of using a product called Agritane Plus. I'm not sure if everyone's aware, but that plus means that it also has a nitrification inhibitor. Nitrification is not something we want to slow down when we're doing top dress applications. In fact, if you have a crop that's short for nitrogen and needing it right away, you would like to have your urea portion nitrifying as fast as possible. So you'll seriously want to talk to your dealer about your choice of Agritane versus Agritane Plus. We're looking at our long season crops, for example, corn, sunflowers, potatoes that we might be putting nitrogen on. You can look at this Manitoba data that we have and showing that the crop needs a little bit of nitrogen in June as it's establishing, but the main uptake is not really kicking in until we're into early July. And so we have some opportunity or a window. And in fact, if you're a corn grower, you'll soon be tuned in from the North Dakota nitrogen recommendations that they are strongly advocating a return to side dress applications just to protect our nitrogen. So that means that implements like this or others may be returning to cornfields. This is a very tried and proven way to fertilize corn with either anhydrous ammonia side dressing, or you could side dress with UAN. I just have a notion here on urea or 28%. If they're going on as top dressed applications, be aware that urea, if it falls in the whorl of the plant, it can cause leaf injury. Similarly, growers should look to plumb up their sprayers so that UAN is directed not onto the foliage, but onto the soil. Now the other question, is it too late? Is it already too late for good yields? And my question for Lionel is already, like I think it's a little soon, but there may be some considerations that farmers are making. One is, are they looking now at switching crops or switching maturities with fertilizer rates? We do talk, as seeding is delayed into June, that's often when we talk about, reducing or modifying nitrogen rates for two reasons. One is by June we know yield potentials have dropped, and we also know that for crops like cereals and canola that the natural mineralization of organic nitrogen better matches crop uptake. So that's two of the reasons why we start reducing nitrogen applications once we get very late. But if you're wanting to do tinkering now on your nitrogen rates, I want to show a couple options here. One is using different response curves. The other is using a risk-averse suggestion. And the other people might be using is just changing it, amount of nitrogen per bushel expected. This is the yield curves that we use in our nitrogen rate calculator in Manitoba, based on 2 to 3 dozen studies each, and our yield potentials are based on moisture limitations, generally lack of moisture limitation. So that blue dotted bar at the top is kind of our full yield potential for spring wheat, topping out at about 65 bushels the acre. We can get yields higher than that, but this is the average yield of about 24 studies. We could see that if one thought that yield potential was going to be less, they could drop back and use the dry moisture curve, but it may be a little misleading to do that because that dry moisture curve is really not what we're dealing with this year. This year, the yield potential is not because of lack of moisture, but maybe the delay because of excess moisture. But you can see here that option does exist. Certainly in years when moisture is limiting, you could drop from the moist curve to the dry or to the arid if it's very dry and you're on sandy soils. I suggest people tinker with the nitrogen rate calculator. I've had all kinds of calls from Saskatchewan and other areas wishing to use it, and it would be nice if Manitoba growers were using it also in some of their decisions. You simply Google those words below and you can find it. Where you change the cost of your fertilizer, put in your soil test levels, and then put in some of your recommendations based from the soil test and expected prices. And if we go to look at the wheat, for example, this table I have up here is with $7 per bushel wheat, and it's suggesting that return is optimized with about 100 pounds of nitrogen on top of the 30 that's already in the soil, and that would be giving yield potential about 63 bushels the acre. And growers can look at this and see what's the impact of changing nitrogen rates or on profitability or yield potential simply by using some of the information in the curve here and looking at what's the impact of a reduced rate. And so that's one thing. They can also use this to compare the price scenarios about if crop prices are dropping or if fertilizer prices are high. Those are the two most popular options for this calculator. But a third and rarely used option is one where you can use risk management. This is the marginal return table that you can click on, and what it does is it indicates to you what is the return per dollar spent on fertilizer, nitrogen fertilizer at those rates. And the model, the way it's set up right now, it's giving you $1 back for the last dollar spent on nitrogen. So that is still considering very good low-risk situations. As growers feel that they're entering an era of higher risk, maybe due to the environment, whatever, they can choose to exercise risk averseness. A way to do that economically is to start demanding more return back for the last dollar they spend. And so instead of looking for $1 back for the last dollar spent, they can look for $1.25 or $1.50 or something like that using this option. Again, that's up to the individual farmer to sort out. So I'd suggest, use the nitrogen rate calculator, look at this marginal return function, and yes, look at exercising a bit more risk averseness. One thing this will do, it will reduce your nitrogen rate, so it will reduce the cost. What it may do is forsake some of that higher yield potential if yields still continue to be high at full yield potential. But if people are wanting to use a risk-averse tool, here it is. So as far as reducing nitrogen rates, I guess my question may still be early to consider doing this. But if you do, and then conditions turn around, use some of the previous discussed information, and you can make supplemental applications if conditions do improve. The other question you had, Linus, what about, is it still worth fertilizing alfalfa stands? The scenario describing a late wet spring, probably a poor first cut because it's slow getting going. Maybe not a second cut. Will it respond to applied phosphate, potash, and sulfur? Or should it simply buy hay instead? And I thought there was profitability in the beef business again. That's what my neighbor is telling me, because I'm looking to buy some beef heifers to put on pasture and fatten. But anyways, what are the options for some of these beef producers? Well, I guess my first question is, before someone would put on a standard blend or their standard fertilizer or consider withholding it, what's their soil test say? And we'll look at some data later that expresses that. The other one is, have they used the best use of their manure? And or is just the last year in hay? Are we just squeezing the last little bit out of that ground that we want? And if we want to do that cheap, maybe we withhold that nitrogen. But if we do, or not nitrogen, that PK&S. But if we do withhold that PK&S, we'll probably fulfill our wishes that might just be the last year of that stand because the grasses will start to take over badly. Remember, as a forage producer, if you're not fertilizing, you're mining soil reserves. If we look at, if we want to base our decisions on data, we have some very strong forage research that was done in western Manitoba in the 80s that we rely upon here. Here's some work done by Lorraine Bailey with Ag Canada, and looking at the unfertilized versus fertilized yield response. And I have separated it. I've separated it by the soil type that they run. So in a 5-year experiments on the clay loam soil, you can see that yes, there's yield increase to applying that rate of fertilizer, but it's maybe going from 4 to 5 tons per acre. So that's like a 25% yield increase with those rates of fertilizer. And in here you can see that they were getting very high yields and 3 cuts a year. And this is the first cut is the blue, second cut yellow, and the third cut is green. However, if we move over to their studies that were done on sandy loam soil, you can see that essentially a fertilization program, largely I think the potash applications there, increase yields about 4-fold. So my first question is for farmers wanting to consider reducing rates is, what type of soil texture are you on? Your clay loam soils provide you a fair bit more wiggle room than some of these sandy loam soils. The thumb rule is that if you want to return what you remove, or consider that every ton of alfalfa removes about 60 pounds of nitrogen, which you shouldn't be paying for, 15 pounds of phosphate, 60 of potash, and 6 of sulfur. So if you're looking at a 3 ton per acre yield, you're removing 45 pounds of phosphate, 180 of potash, and 18 of sulfur. Over 5 years, those are pretty gigantic numbers, and you can see why we do have concern. If manure is not going back on those fields, we can do some pretty severe depletion of phosphorus and potash on some of these fields. back to the research data, if we look at response to phosphorus, we can see that with 5 station years on 3 locations, with some low to medium soil test levels, that there was yield response to about the 40 pounds per acre phosphorus that went on. And that yield response essentially doubled yield. And but you don't need to believe me, you can do it yourself. The folks in the Interlake, the extension staff there, have done about half a dozen of these phosphorus ramps in fields to show farmers the necessity or the need for phosphorus. And I spoke to Jane Thornton earlier today, and she'd be really excited if someone asked her to coach them in this. Anyways, it's simply a nitrogen ramp or ladder, or like the nitrogen ramp or ladder, only it's phosphorus instead of nitrogen. I want to show you the results of some of the Interlake work. One is, the first comparison is a high rate versus the none. And the thing you can see first is not just yield potential, but without applying more seed, you get more alfalfa. And if with these depleted or neglected stands, they quickly degrade to pure grass or dandelions versus alfalfa. The alfalfa succumbs fairly quickly and stands peter out. What that ramp would look like would be the rate of high rate of phosphorus, then your 0, and then it ramps up in levels. And simply you would do some type of an assessment to see at what point is it economical to apply. This is just the first year of this ramp that was in the Arborg area, but we can see even the difference, the huge difference that even 20 or 40 pounds of phosphorus makes to the alfalfa component of that stand. On to potash, we can see that very good yield response to potash, but those are soils that are fairly low. If you are on clay loam soils, you may still have good reserves, and you may still be able to produce some very good yields without a lot of applied potash. Not so if you're on some sandy soils or soils that have been depleted. And sulfur, here there's some spectacular yield increases to sulfur in Manitoba studies, but the fine print says that this occurred on a gray wooded soil in Manitoba. Those are soils known to be with sulfur deficiencies. Here the initial soil test level was 13 pounds of sulfur per acre, and so that's why yields were increased threefold. If you're in a situation where you've got uniform clay loam soils and you've had applications in the past, you probably are not looking at this level. However, we note here the line there is protein, and as if sulfur is neglected, we also see you get a great reduction in protein level of that alfalfa. If we start splitting hairs on fertilizer timing specifics, top dressing can actually be done at several different times during the growing season. One of the options that people might have been looking at is a spring application here. Spring applications tend to see a little more impact in the first cut, and in fact, if a person is applying all their potash first cut, potash is a nutrient that the plant can luxury consume or take luxury uptake, and it may actually be poor use of potash to put it on early because you'll just end up cropping a bunch of it off. If your fertilizer is put on after the first cutting, it tends to enhance the later cuts. Fall applications, particularly potash, improve winter hardiness. But splitting these applications generally is not profitable or economical unless your yields are exceptionally high, and that's not us. So forage fertility for us is more a practice of targeting meeting your removal amounts. We wouldn't see much difference due to application timing. I am an advocate of applying it after the first cut because then equipment is available. Soils are generally dry, so we don't injure stands by compacting it or tramping crowns. And there's less risk of phosphorus runoff versus these late fall applications, which really are vulnerable to some losses. So Lionel, I'm going to close it there. Maybe there's some questions you want to direct my way.
Yes, John, I have a question here. Is it too late to expect good yields? Would increasing seeding rates help in seeding or speeding up maturity by providing more main heads, less tillers, and so maintaining the good yields even if seeded later?
No and no. Would you like me to expand on that a bit?
Sure.
I don't think it's too late to expect good yields, but I haven't been in Western Manitoba lately. I don't, and Mike paints a pretty gloomy picture there. But I think that farmers might want to reassess and dial back to some of their yield expectations. Last year, yields were extremely high. And it may be that instead of looking at the 70 and 80 bushels of spring wheat per acre that we might have experienced last year, maybe the 40 is back. The norm is probably back more in the picture. So I would maybe give up on the exceptional yields that we experienced last year, but I'm not saying that we're into low yields yet. And tinkering with seeding rates. I'm not really the seeding rate agronomist, but I'm never an advocate of low seeding rates. And I think that normal seeding rates, I'm kind of old school. Still thinking pounds per acre, but old school for me means 90 to 120 pounds of wheat per acre or 2 bushel seeding rates. And I'm not thinking that rates should be much lower than that. But Lionel can answer that question better than me. He's the general agronomist. I'm just a soil fertility guy.
Okay, thank you. We have another question. It's when you say dial back and fertility, what percentage per week would you recommend as we move into June seeding?
Oh, I don't know. Ask me in June. I'm very at this point am not looking to dial back a lot, but use the calculator there, and you can look at the impact of moving back rates 10 to 20 pounds. Doesn't have a lot of impact on cereal yields, but decisions to reduce 30 to 40 pounds, then you're really starting to impact yield. And so I'd refrain from making large reductions. Your people on the ground, they're probably better to make yield potential decisions than myself.
Okay, thank you, John. I don't have any more questions. Lionel, did you have anything?
Maybe one, just John. One of the questions I've been getting a fair bit was on phosphate for the spring here, and you know, some producers are wondering if they could get away by lowering maybe some of their phosphate amounts, especially if they're doing more of a you know, keeping the levels, applying to keep the levels the same. And I'm wondering what's the lowest rate you would probably look at going with seed applied, so you could still get that good, you know, seedling emergence and seedling vigor.
15, and that is the most important rate of phosphorus is the first 15 pounds not the last 15 pounds. You know, a 45 bushel canola crop's removing 45 pounds of phosphorus, but the 15 pounds that's most important is the first 15. If people are already adopting a survival philosophy, a survival strategy, you don't forsake the first 15 pounds of phosphorus. You start removing from the back above that. So you'd move from 45 to 30 or 30 to 15, but not less than 15. And you would have to recognize then that you are making a conscious decision to pull down your soil reserves. So that difference needs to be made up if you're going to continue the farming business. To put on less than the crops removing is a rented land or retirement program. So at some point, those differences will need to be made up. But as a survival strategy, make sure you've got the first 15 pounds on. I hate talking negative like this, but you invited it.
Okay, no, that's good, John. I just wanted to get your point of view there. That's kind of what I was looking for. So great. Thanks for coming on the webinar today, John. A lot of really good information there, and I encourage people to use the nitrogen calculator too. It's a fairly good tool.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, there's a couple more things I guess that I wanted to work through here today, and one was just a little bit of a crop update, and really in the southwest here in South Parkland region, we haven't got a lot of crop in the ground. There are some pockets where some crop is in, some wheat, some peas, but majority of the equipment is ready to go. It's just a matter of a lot of the low areas drying out right now, so producers can make more efficient use of the land and not have to go back. If the rain comes like Mike is mentioning, I know a lot of producers that I've been talking to were hoping to get out on the fields, you know, this weekend. There's some harrowing being done yesterday to try to dry out some of these lower areas, but I think the weekend was the goal, so hopefully the rain amount that's been predicted isn't as much or misses us. Once again, I'm going to be putting this on a weekly basis, and this is basically our Manitoba crop weather report, and I have it for the southwest here, and so basically this information is available for the whole province. I cut it down to the southwest area, but if you go onto our website, our Manitoba Agriculture website, this information is there. And it's good information, especially for some of the, you know, the corn and soybean growers to track our growing degree days and our corn heat units. Last week we talked a little bit about the hybrid fall rye variety that's going to be that's being worked on and grown in Manitoba here, and we were out last Thursday looking at some of the fields, and this was some of that hybrid fall rye. Planted into pea stubble and actually looking really good, and really good growth, really good crown and root development. So it made it through the winter really good. Same producer had some flourish winter wheat in canola stubble right beside it, and looks like the winter wheat a little bit behind, but kind of expected. Fall rye is a little bit more aggressive when it comes to winter hardiness, and this seems to get going a little bit earlier in the spring. So we're going to try to keep track of these fields throughout the growing season to show you development, especially the new hybrid fall rye, and we'll try to keep track of this winter wheat field as well. Elmer sent those pictures in, and he also sent this one in where a producer sowed some winter wheat into some standing, I guess it was grass / sod already. It was pasture land, and it's when it looks like the winter wheat has made it through not too bad. We'll see how it goes, but there's definitely some spots where it needs to fill in, so it'll be interesting to see how well it tillers. But just an example of what equipment can do nowadays, and how well winter wheat can survive if we do get good snow cover. John, and there was a few questions regarding seeding dates and how does it affect yield. This information comes from crop insurance, and the arrow there points to where we are right about today, the 14th. So you can see we're kind of right on that line where we're still in that 100% crop. So I agree with John that, you know, I don't think there needs to be a panic yet for making any changes for seeding or fertilizing. I think the potential for good yields are still there. It's if we do get the rain and it tends to maybe keep us off the land for another week, then maybe we might start looking at or seeing some changes happening, because when you get into the third week and already to the beginning of June, on some of the crops we're getting into that, you know, 80 to 90% yields already. So definitely something that we'll be watching as we get through the planting season here. A couple other things. There's been a lot of talk about soil temperatures right now. Soil temperatures haven't changed a whole bunch since last week. Still looking at about 5 or 6 degrees Celsius. So when you're looking at planting crops, you know, here's just a little chart that can be handy to have. Barley through canola all would germinate fairly regular right now, and we're actually seeing volunteer canola germinating already. So even if the soil temperatures don't warm up, or the air temperature doesn't warm enough to bring the soil temperature up, I think producers will be out there seeding anyways. Maybe the big thing would be if you're planning on soybeans or corn, you know, the soil temperature definitely isn't favorable right now for them to germinate. So maybe just a little caution as to how long they might have to sit in the ground before you get them going. So hopefully we get some heat to get that soil temperature up. And a little bit on foxtail barley here. We're getting a few calls over the last little while as to what to do about foxtail barley. It seems to be a weed that's kind of taken over since 2011 in some fields, and producers are having a little bit of issues as to how to control it. It seems to do well in wet areas, which we have lots of now, and saline areas. You know, any areas that are left alone, or any areas where the fields are, you know, where we don't get a lot of tillage done anymore, those areas seem to be just the foxtail barley seems to be developing really good in those areas and producing a lot of seed, and just seems to be becoming a weed in those areas. It does grow mainly from seed and does produce a lot of seed, and it can germinate throughout the growing season, and it can germinate even in cool, damp soil. And as you can see right now, if you were to go out and look at the foxtail barley that's starting to grow, there's definitely lots of nice young shoots already, and the soil temperature is cool, and a lot of those areas are really damp. And the picture here just shows a lot of the seed heads from last year, and then you got the new growth coming through the stand. But definitely lots of seed and lots of potential for that weed to keep developing throughout the year. Control, that's the big question, and tillage does help, and if it's possible, that would be one way of helping to control it. If you can, and probably one of the best ways of doing it with chemical control is late fall application, and probably a glyphosate product, and that's when you can probably do most damage to it, or early in the spring, and that would be getting out there as soon as you can, travel by those areas and getting some glyphosate on those areas right now. Usually if you're trying to control in-crop, most of the products that are available are only going to do suppression, and you're probably going to have that problem again for, you know, for the following year, or regrowing again in the fall. Regarding chemical control, the glyphosate, the higher rates, best to look at the guide to chemical weed control to see the rates that are recommended for different glyphosate products. If it's in a broadleaf crop, I mentioned that there are several products for in-crop control, and again, but that's only going to be for suppression. there has been some talk about Everest and a glyphosate mix to help to controlling the multiple flushes, and this would be a two-method approach where you would do a glyphosate Everest application pre-seed, or pre-emergent I should say, and then follow it up with Everest in crop, and it seems to be getting a little bit better control and a little longer control, and helping reduce the amount of seed population in the soil. So again, probably the best thing for the chemical control is can look to the Guide to Chemical Weed Control, and it has some good information on control of foxtail barley. Want to mention that there's a wheat seedling identification day, and it's going to be happening on May the 30th in Carmen at the Ian Morris Research Station. Starts at 1:15. It's going to go till 3:30. It's free of charge, and everyone is welcome. So if you're not in the field and you want to learn some information regarding identifying wheat seedlings, it would be a great opportunity to see the plants and be able to ask questions on identification. And if you're a scout or in industry, it would be a good opportunity to get a good refresher course. So May the 30th at the Carmen Ian Morrison Research Station.
So Lionel, I do have a question here. How much growth do you want to see before spraying foxtail barley this spring?
I would try to get it in 1 to 2 leaf stage. One leaf is going to be pretty hard, but as you can see from that one picture I had there, you can see that we're definitely getting, you know, at least 2 to 3 leaf stage. I'd be hitting it in this stage here, and you'd be surprised if you pull away that thatch and all that material from last winter's growth and straw. A lot of those are in the 2 to 3 leaf stage already. They don't look very big from the road, or even from when you get walking in the field. But when you start moving that material around, there's definitely a lot of grass there. So if it's in the stage where you see right now, that's when I would hit it, and then be prepared. Either the problem most people have is, if you were to go out there and spray right now, you're basically only going to be spraying. The only thing you're going to be killing is the foxtail barley, because there's not a lot of other weeds out there right now. If you could, what I would do, or I like to recommend people do, is go out there and spray it just the areas where you know the foxtail barley is now, and then when you do your burn off later on, after or before seeding, then you can hit it again and do the whole field, and you'd be surprised at how much will be still growing from seed after you spray now, and how much and what that second application will do to help get control of it. And I guess that's going to be it for the webinar today. Is there any other questions, Linda? If not, if you have questions,
I'm going to tell them to send me 50.
If you got questions, then you can get a hold of myself. There's my information there. There's Linda's information if you're interested in getting the CCA credits or the CEU credits. There is the information for the FPAs in Southwest and South Parkland. So if you've got questions, give us a call and we'll be glad to help. And then the FPAs for crops in Manitoba. If you have questions and you're anywhere, if you can contact any of these people, I'm sure if they can't help you, they'll find somebody that can. So that's good information to have there to get, especially as we get into the busy season here. And I guess to end the webinar today, only in Manitoba where we're cutting grass in the snow.